old cars in the town, providing an ample supply of replacement parts. Meanwhile, Jim discovered something peculiar in their temporary residence. The wires on the lamp had only plastic insulation and no metal conductors. Even the plug was broken, but the lamp still managed to light up. As the couple marveled at the oddity, Jade suddenly burst in. He had also found the strange wiring and came seeking help to repair the radio, which needed more components. They went to the site of their past car accident, dismantling any useful items. Before leaving, Jim glanced at their trailer and recalled the question his wife had asked, feeling a chill down his spine. Subsequently, the two went to a large tree on the outskirts, as the radio needed to receive a signal with the wires placed as high as possible. Jade admitted that climbing heights made his legs weak and his head dizzy, so the task of climbing the tree fell to Jim, much to his annoyance. However, in order to leave the town, he went to the base of the tree. At home, Tabitha was also keeping herself busy. The townspeople had a rule that any unneeded or ownerless items would be gathered and stored in the town restaurant. When Tabitha brought some items to the storage warehouse, she accidentally came across a beaded bracelet. Holding it in her hand, she wore an expression of puzzlement and shock. She then took the bracelet home with her. As she pondered about it, the lights nearby began to flicker again. She questioned how the lights could be on when the wiring was empty. Tabitha decided to break open the wall to investigate the mystery. Jim was about to reach the top of the tree. Just as he was about to install the wires, Jade suddenly noticed something strange. He touched the tree trunk and, to his surprise, a large amount of blood seeped out. There was also a circular symbol nearby. He looked up and saw many bodies hanging upside down from the treetop. Jade was terrified. To make matters worse, a soldier in uniform appeared out of nowhere, brandishing a gun. Jade was so scared that he ran for his shitty life, with the soldier chasing his smell relentlessly. The soldier fired his gun during the pursuit. Jade was soon caught, and just when he thought his life was in danger, he heard Jim's voice. Jade realized that it was all just a hallucination. However, he was still terrified. He left, cursing under his breath, as he had made an even bigger discovery. Back at the town restaurant, Jade was drawing the circular pattern he had seen in the hallucination. The restaurant owner noticed the pattern and looked puzzled. Ignoring Jade's attempts to explain, she went straight to the storage room. On a shelf, there was a box of belongings left behind by the townspeople. In one of the diaries, there was a circular pattern identical to the one Jade had drawn. Jade was shocked, realizing that what he had seen was not just a simple hallucination. Feeling abandoned, Jim looked at the wires he had installed on the tree. He reluctantly turned on the walkie-talkie, which emitted a rustling sound. He tried to call for help, but there was no response. He had no choice but to take the device home. Seeing a large hole in the wall, Jim was puzzled. He learned from his son that Tabitha was in the basement, so he went downstairs out of curiosity. He saw his wife digging furiously through the dirt. After much explanation, he learned that she believed the source of power for the lights must come from somewhere. She followed the wires in the wall, discovering that the coreless wires led underground. Therefore, she decided to dig and find out what was going on. Jim thought this was ridiculous, but Tabitha countered that she had seen even more absurd things. She then pointed at the bracelet she had brought back from the restaurant. Tabitha had recognized that the handmade bracelet was the one she had lost years ago in their hometown. Jim could hardly accept this, insisting that it was just a similar design. Tabitha quickly refuted, explaining that when she made the bracelet, she accidentally broke one of the beads. The bracelet she found was undoubtedly the same one. Eventually, Jim was persuaded by his wife to join her in the search for answers. However, there was still something weighing on Tabitha's mind. After Ethan had experienced a traumatic event, he was terrified. So Tabitha went to the church to find the priest who had been the first to arrive at the scene. She wanted to confirm if the culprit Sarah was really dead. The priest's response was vague. He had seen Sarah run into the woods while chasing her. Since a night had already passed, it was likely that her survival chances in the forest were slim. Tabitha didn't press further, but instead voiced her biggest concern that if they were already dead. However, the priest only replied that we were trapped in this wretched town, suffering endlessly. How is that any different from death? It was clear that he harbored deep hatred for the town. After Tabitha left, the priest went down to the church basement alone. There he found a woman with her hands and feet tied up. It was none other than Sarah, the psychopathic murderer. It turned out she hadn't escaped the day before, but had been captured by the priest and taken to the basement. According to the town rules set by Boyd, Sarah was to be locked up in the iron shed. The reason the priest hid her was that Sarah's brother had once told him that she could hear strange voices. Desperate to leave the town, the priest believed Sarah was the only one who could find a way out of the goddamned town. After all, not everyone could receive revelations from demons. The priest even suspected that everyone in the town was experiencing a story similar to one from the Bible, only it hadn't yet ended. Sarah, startled by his words, confessed everything she had received from the demons. The demons said they had been in the town for too long, and also wanted to leave just like the residents. If Sarah did as they instructed, everyone could leave. The priest, somewhat puzzled by the demons' intentions, asked why she would so easily believe them. Sarah replied that the demons were omniscient. They had once told her 2 cars would arrive that night, and the next day, Jim's family and Jade arrived exactly in town. The demons also informed her that 2 cars had appeared in the town years ago, and everyone in them had died. Recognizing Sarah's importance, the priest urged her to produce evidence, as the townspeople might not believe her. Just then, Sarah's body began to experience intense pain. She shouted for him to bring her a pen and paper. Once he did, her hands uncontrollably scribbled on the paper. After some time, she stopped. The priest was puzzled by the pattern on the paper and asked Sarah what it meant. She told him that the demons had been watching him and saw him bury a package when he first arrived in town. This was the proof of the demon's existence. The priest seemed to remember something and went to a pile of stones outside the town where he used to meditate. It turned out that he had hidden a dark secret there. Eagerly, the priest retrieved the package, which contained a bottle of alcohol, a blood-stained piece of clothing, and another item that made the priest's face turn pale. The design on the chocolate wrapper was identical to the pattern drawn by Sarah. At this point, the priest became flustered. The town's sheriff, Boyd, had yet to grasp the true power of the demons. After burying Sarah's brother with his deputy, he shared his plan. A few days ago, he had spent a night in a trailer, proving that the amulet could indeed protect against the demons' attacks. With this in mind, he decided to take the amulet and search for an exit in the forest. The townspeople had already confirmed many times that the road could not lead them out of the town. Therefore, the exit must be hidden in the forest that everyone was afraid to enter. However, Kenny didn't agree with his plan, saying it was no different from courting death. Boyd hesitated and shared his own concerns. It turned out that Boyd's father had been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease at his age. Recently, Boyd's hand had been shaking uncontrollably, indicating he might soon fall ill as well. Unable to protect the townspeople any longer, Boyd wanted to explore a way out while he still could. After knowing Boyd's predicament, Kenny finally understood and agreed. If Boyd met with an accident, Kenny would take over his duties and continue to protect the townspeople. The best partners went outside to play a game of baseball, as if bidding a final farewell. In contrast to the townspeople's fear and solemnity, the people in the colony house were much more at ease. By chance, Julie spotted a bunch of flowers at the door, and out of love for them, brought them to her room. Fatima teased her, asking if the flowers were sent by the demons. As night fell, everyone in the colony house was sound asleep. A man wearing glasses quietly crossed the hall, climbed the stairs, and entered the innermost room on the upper floor. With a somewhat dazed expression, he opened the curtains. A girl holding flowers stood in front of the window and asked if she could come in. It turns out the reclusive man secretly harbors feelings for a demon. Fortunately, he always manages to resist her temptations and never opens the window for her. The others, unaware of this secret, are decorating their rooms as they prepare for a banquet that night. Fatima is delighted and even brings out her long-cherished clothes for the occasion. Julie admires her optimistic attitude. She doesn't seem like someone trapped in a small town at all. Victor is still behaving as usual, searching for his favorite canned peaches in the kitchen. Donna tells him that they've run out of canned peaches, leaving Victor with a disappointed look. He says that for so many years this was the only thing that hadn't changed. Now, even that has changed, intensifying his ominous premonitions. As night falls, the man with glasses leaves a bouquet of flowers at the colony house's entrance, hoping that the demon he fancies will visit once again. It's as if he's welcoming a deadly celebration. The town's sheriff, as usual, diligently reminds the residents that it's time to return home and secure their doors and windows. When he finishes his task and returns to the police station, he's surprised to see the priest waiting at the entrance, insisting that they discuss something important. Seeing the priest's determined attitude, Boyd reluctantly abandons his plans to go home, preparing to spend the night at the police station instead. The priest is astonished when he sees the many bags on the table and asks if Boyd is planning a long journey. Boyd doesn't intend to keep his plan to explore the forest for an exit a secret, so he shares it with the priest. The priest doesn't pry further. Instead, he asks Boyd to look inside his own backpack, revealing bloody clothes that were dug up from a pit during the day. The priest recalls that before arriving in the town, a child had come to confess to him, but he didn't take it seriously and dismissed the child with a piece of chocolate. That night, the child tragically jumped to his death. The clothes belonged to the child, and the priest had been filled with regret. While standing alone on a bridge drinking, he seemed to hear God's call in a daze and drove to the mysterious town. The first thing the priest did upon arrival was to bury the child's clothes and chocolate. Boyd, puzzled, asks why he's sharing this information now. The priest explains that he's tied Sarah up in the church basement. Boyd is shocked. Previously, someone had violated the rules, and the priest had let him enter the iron shed without hesitation. So why is he making an exception for Sarah? The priest explains that Sarah can hear revelations and might be the key to finding a way out. The strongest evidence is the chocolate symbol Sarah drew. She had only been in town for 6 months and couldn't possibly know about the chocolate package the priest had buried years ago. Boyd gradually relents, questioning why, if the demons know everything, they would help everyone. The priest admits he doesn't know, but it at least shows that Sarah is special. He then proposes his plan, hoping that when Boyd explores the forest for an exit, he can bring the priest and Sarah along. Perhaps it will have unexpected effects. This leaves Boyd in a state of hesitation. At this moment, everyone in the colony house was gathered together, enjoying a lively banquet. Donna called for everyone's attention, as she had something to say. As it turned out, today marked the first anniversary of Fatima's arrival at the house. Everyone undoubtedly adored this optimistic young girl. Donna even gave her a flower wreath as a gift, which touched Fatima deeply. Another woman gave her a smelly kiss, much to the surprise of Julie, who knew that Fatima already had a boyfriend. As everyone continued to eat and drink, they didn't notice that the reclusive man with glasses had once again snuck up to the second-floor room. Expertly, he drew back the curtains, and as expected, his beloved was waiting outside the window. She told him this would be their last meeting, because the feeling of seeing but not touching was awful. Blinded by love, the man finally opened the window and gently invited her into the room. After closing the window, the couple, who had always been separated by glass, began their intimacy. However, the girl soon revealed her true demonic form. After cleaning the blood from her body, she opened the window once more. The pitch-black night concealed the slow approach of several figures from the nearby forest. Unaware of the impending arrival of the terrifying demons, the people in the colony house were immersed in the joyful atmosphere. Only Boyd's son, Ellis, wasn't in high spirits. The birthday celebration reminded him of his late mother, leading to a heated argument with the others. His girlfriend, Fatima, quickly intervened and advised him to go upstairs to cool off. She then returned to the living room and noticed her friend sitting on the sofa, looking unhappy. Learning that her friend admired her jacket, Fatima didn't hesitate to take it off and give it to her. The girl was delighted and said she had something to give her in return, quickly heading to her room. At this point, Julie approached Fatima and asked about the woman who had kissed her earlier, questioning their relationship since she was dating Ellis. Fatima explained that it was just a bit of fun between her and the woman. This revelation was difficult for Julie to accept, and she hurriedly ran upstairs. Meanwhile, Victor was in his room packing up his belongings when he suddenly heard a knock at the door. To his surprise, it was Julie. She knew that only here could she escape the noisy crowd. Although Victor let her in, he had no intention of engaging in conversation, simply continuing to pack his things as if he was preparing to leave. At that moment, the girl had retrieved her beloved pillow from her room, intending to give it to Fatima. As she passed by the room of the man in glasses, she heard laughter coming from inside. Upon entering, she was surrounded by several demons wearing sinister grins, indicating her tragic fate. Meanwhile, the banquet guests had nearly finished their drinks. A burly man sitting on the stairs suddenly felt liquid dripping from above. Looking up, he saw a demon staring down at them with a malicious grin. The terrified residents scattered in all directions, only to find smiling demons at every turn. They had no choice but to flee toward the colony house's exit. Donna was leading the way, and urged the escaping residents to get into their cars and head to the nearby town. Fatima realized that her boyfriend Ellis was not among them, and refused to leave without him. Ellis, who had been awakened by the commotion downstairs, cautiously stepped into the hallway, only to find a trail of blood seeping from a room and his girlfriend's yellow clothing. He entered the room. To his relief, the body he found belonged to Fatima's friend, who was wearing Fatima's clothes. But soon enough, a demon with a pig smile entered the room. Ellis quickly broke the window and made his way to the second-floor balcony. As the demon was about to catch up, he mustered the courage to jump down. Fatima saw this scene and rushed to help her boyfriend stand up. By this time, Donna had already driven away. The couple had no choice but to return to the colony house, closing and locking the front door tightly. They also closed the inner door and pressed firmly against the protective talisman on it, hoping that the demons wouldn't break through. As it turned out, they had done the right thing. The sound of the demons pounding on the door came from outside, but the couple would not be fooled. They had narrowly escaped danger. Victor in the attic heard screams coming from outside and realized that the demons had arrived. Fortunately, he was prepared and had secured a rope to the roof beam. He let Julie climb down the rope first, and he followed closely behind with a metal box. Julie suggested they should head back to the town, but after seeing a young boy in the woods, Victor hesitated for a moment before insisting they run into the forest. With no better choice, Julie could only follow his lead. Soon, Victor and Julie arrived at the base of a large tree that he and Ethan had visited before. He told Julie to hide inside the tree's hollow. Strangely, as she jumped into the tree hollow, Julie found herself in a basement with stone walls all around, leaving her unsure of what to do. Meanwhile, in the town, Boyd and the priest were still discussing Sarah's issue when they suddenly heard a car honking outside. They rushed out to find Donna leading the survivors from the colony house. Trailing behind them were the slowly approaching demons. Once everyone had entered the police station, the priest heard someone calling his name. Seeing this, Boyd opened fire and helped the priest into a room. The priest's neck was bleeding profusely, and now he could only emit some weak chicken sounds. Boyd knew that the priest was beyond saving, so he held him in his arms and prayed with Donna until the priest drew his last breath to meet Jesus. On the other hand, Jim and his family were unaware of the tragedy unfolding at the colony house. He was working on a signal receiver, hoping to connect it to a walkie-talkie and contact the outside world. Tabitha was very relieved, although they could not be certain that this method would work. At least everyone was making an effort. Moreover, her plan to dig a hole was still underway. Following the mysterious electrical wires, she had already excavated a hole nearly 2 meters deep. When Jim asked her when it would end, Tabitha replied that as long as they kept digging, they would eventually uncover the truth. After the demons' attack, only a few managed to survive and sought refuge in the local police station, where they spent a terrifying night. Kenny arranged for the survivors to stay temporarily in the homes of other townspeople. News of the horrifying events spread quickly, and everyone became panic-stricken. Kenny suggested that Boyd should make a speech to calm everyone down, but Boyd refused. He believed it was time for Kenny to step up and handle the situation, while he had more important matters to attend to. Boyd soon found himself in the church's basement, where he discovered a frightened and surprised Sarah. He led her into the woods, and she was puzzled, and asked why he brought her here and where the priest was. Boyd told her that the priest had been killed the night before. Sarah was heartbroken upon hearing that. Boyd, however, was not so kind to her. If it wasn't for the priest's insistence that she had some connection with the demons, he wouldn't have taken her into the woods to find a way out. The two soon arrived at a small cabin, where Boyd told Sarah to wait while he returned to town for necessary supplies. Sarah assured him she wouldn't run away. In fact, everything she had done before was to help everyone escape the town. This reminded Boyd of his own arrival in the town after he had just retired from the military. He had planned a road trip with his family, only to find their way blocked by a huge tree, just like what happened to Jim's family. They mysteriously ended up in the eerie town, which wasn't as peaceful as it is now. The kind-hearted priest stopped Boyd's car and told everyone that darkness was approaching and that they needed to hide quickly. Boyd and his wife initially didn't want to listen, but when they heard a terrifying roar, they panicked and followed the priest into a basement. At that time, there were no protective talismans, so the townspeople had to hide all over the place at night, hoping the demons wouldn't find them. Terrifying screams echoed from time to time, and everyone was too scared to breathe. When daylight finally arrived, the man emerged from the basement to find corpses scattered everywhere. Other lucky survivors also came out of their hiding spots, and Boyd and his wife looked shocked. They were curious about what kind of place this town was. The priest, however, was filled with sorrow. Afterward, Boyd knew that this couldn't go on. The first step was to gather everyone together and look out for one another. He, the priest, and Donna took the lead in gathering the survivors, storing useful supplies in a restaurant, and implementing a unified distribution system. They also planned areas for spending the night, with people taking turns on guard duty, ensuring that everyone had their basic survival needs met for the time being. Boyd soon found the priest and realized that the small town needed to become self-sufficient. He prepared to explore the woods, as otherwise, everyone would eventually starve. His exploration turned out to be a success, as he found goats, chickens, and ducks in the forest. Although the priest found it unbelievable, Boyd decided to set up a farm to secure a stable food supply. Boyd's son, Ellis, noticed that his mother had become nervous ever since they arrived in the town. She would occasionally stand by the road, lost in thought, mumbling about how her experiences were similar to a dream she once had. Ellis sensed something was wrong and urged his father to stop exploring the woods and spend more time with his mother. However, Boyd was preoccupied with the animals he'd found in the forest and believed that his wife wouldn't be so fragile. Ignoring his son's advice, Boyd ventured back into the woods. Unexpectedly, Boyd encountered a wolf dog appearing silently in front of him. When he decided to take the dog back to town, the animal suddenly turned and ran away. Boyd chased after it without hesitation. He reached a deeper part of the forest where the wolf dog vanished. Boyd then realized he had lost his way. He wandered around anxiously as darkness fell and terrifying howls echoed in the distance. Frazzled, Boyd raised his gun and cautiously scanned his surroundings. He fell into a cave where he saw a demon slowly approaching from outside. Terrified, Boyd stared wide-eyed, but the demon didn't enter the cave. After a moment, it slowly retreated. Boyd wondered why the demon didn't come in, and noticed that the cave walls were adorned with stones covered in runes. He guessed that these stones were preventing the demons from entering. As daylight broke, Boyd wrapped the talisman stones in his clothes, ready to take them back to town. On his way back, he suddenly heard gunshots and hurried towards the town. To his surprise, it was his wife who was firing the gun. She seemed possessed, shooting at innocent passers-by. Boyd shouted for her to stop, but she mumbled that it was all just a dream, and the only way to go home was to wake everyone up. She must have been under mental pressure, and her husband's absence the previous night had likely contributed to her mental breakdown. It took Boyd quite some time to persuade her to put the gun down, but suddenly their son Ellis appeared, and the wife aimed the gun at him. Without hesitation, Boyd pulled the trigger on his wife. This was probably the reason why Ellis had been giving his father the cold shoulder ever since. When Boyd returned to the town's restaurant, he saw many residents causing a commotion at the entrance. It turned out that they were worried that people from the colony house would come and steal food, so they were preparing to take what belonged to them first. Fortunately, Boyd's authority was highly respected, and with just a few words, he was able to persuade the crowd to disperse. However, he knew that this wouldn't completely eliminate everyone's panic. So he found Kenny and told him that he would go to the forest in a few days, but first he needed to find a way to calm the residents. Kenny felt that calming the residents' emotions was just a temporary solution. They had to find a way out as soon as possible. He then told Boyd that he could go to the forest with peace of mind, and that he could handle the townspeople's affairs. This made Boyd finally proceed without worries. Before setting off, Boyd had one more thing to do. Ellis and his girlfriend had narrowly escaped danger the night before thanks to the talisman stones. However, the boy was still injured and was currently being treated at the hospital. Boyd suddenly appeared at his son's bedside. Ever since his mother passed away, Ellis had been giving his father the cold shoulder. Boyd didn't know if he would be able to return alive from the forest this time, and he wanted his son to know that he had always loved him. But Ellis still appeared indifferent, and Boyd left the room, wiping away his tears. At the door, he happened to meet Donna, who hugged Boyd as a farewell gesture. In the room, Fatima walked over to Ellis and tried to console him. She said that although his father had made some mistakes, the suffering he had endured over the years was no less than Ellis's. Back at the police station, Boyd put away his uniform and badge. Thinking that his son still wouldn't forgive him, he felt heartbroken. When he arrived at the forest with his luggage, he didn't expect Ellis to follow him. He had come to say goodbye to his father. At that moment, Ellis finally realized that he couldn't blame his father for his mother's death. If he didn't say goodbye, it might become a lifelong regret. His heartfelt words finally mended the rift between father and son. After finally convincing Ellis to return, Boyd called Sarah out of the cabin. The two of them walked deeper into the forest. It was uncertain whether they would find the way back on this journey. In the small town, many people were also making efforts to return home. Julie was telling her parents about her strange experience the night before. After being pushed into the tree hole by Victor, she found herself in the town's basement the next second. Her parents were puzzled by this, but only her brother Ethan knew that the tree could randomly teleport people to different places. They were aware that Victor, who knew many secrets, must have gone somewhere else, and they should find him as soon as possible. Another person who had the same idea was Jade. He had accidentally seen the strange symbols and a younger Victor in a booklet earlier, and rushed over to ask Julie about Victor's whereabouts. However, Jim didn't want his daughter to relive the painful experience from the night before, and quickly pulled Jade outside. Jade shared his discovery, which only made Jim angrier. Last time, Jade had tricked him into the forest to set up an antenna, only to leave without a word. Now he wondered what was going on. Jim told Jade that the radio had actually worked, but the signal was too weak for conversation. They should place the antenna higher up. As a result, the two went to the colony house, where Donna was cleaning up the dead bodies scattered all over the floor. Jim proposed his idea, saying that the colony house was situated at the top of the highest peak, and if they could set up the antenna on the roof, the signal would be the strongest. Donna agreed. She then found Kenny and gathered all the residents together, telling them that many people were looking for a way to escape the town, and now it was time for everyone to contribute. This gave everyone new hope, and the fear caused by the demons also dissipated. The residents could be seen carrying various parts needed to build the antenna, heading towards the colony house. On Boyd's way to the forest was eerily quiet, with only their footsteps heard. Fortunately, they didn't encounter any danger. Just before evening, they arrived at a stone-built house. Boyd was familiar with the place because it was here that he had accidentally discovered the sacred stone, and it was the furthest point he had ever reached in the past. He decided to rest here for the night and embark on their adventure the next day. Sarah asked Boyd to unlock her handcuffs, stating that it was inconvenient even to use the restroom. However, her request was denied for safety reasons. The next day, Boyd and Sarah continued deeper into the jungle. They would make markings on trees to avoid getting lost in the forest. However, Sarah's main concern wasn't getting lost. She was afraid they might end up back where they started, like going in circles on the road. Boyd didn't provide an answer, but instead asked her why she believed the demons' words that killing Ethan would allow them to leave the town. Sarah said that everything the demons had told her had come true. They said 2 cars would arrive in the town, and then Jim's family and Jade appeared. The demons also said that if she didn't kill the little boy, Sarah's brother would die, followed by everyone in the town. The first 2 events had already happened, leaving only the last one. After listening to her, Boyd finally understood the girl's helplessness and unlocked her handcuffs. Boyd believed that there would be a time when all questions would be answered, so he pressed on even more diligently. Before long, the 2 heard a crisp sound coming from ahead. Following the source of the noise, they discovered many glass bottles hanging from a large tree, which produced the sound as they swayed and collided. Sarah was puzzled, as it was said that no one had ever ventured this far. Boyd looked carefully and found that there seemed to be something inside the glass bottles. Just as he was about to take one down, Sarah suddenly covered her ears in pain, screaming that they were talking to her again. Then she collapsed to the ground and started convulsing. The other people in the town were also making efforts to escape. They had placed their hopes in a plan to build a radio tower to contact the outside world. However, this was no small task, and despite working all day, they hadn't finished. When they returned to their living quarters, exhausted, some began to doubt if the tower would be useful at all. The next morning, Donna was awakened by a scream. A resident had committed suicide, overwhelmed by the pressure, possibly related to the radio tower. In fact, many people in the colony house had the same concern. Fatima, who was connecting wires, thought that even if the signal tower managed to contact the outside world, how would they leave? And even if they did return home, would they still be the same people? However, Jim hadn't thought that far. He was immersed in the task, and with the radio tower nearing completion, he mentioned that they only needed more wood for support. Donna happened to pass by. Upon hearing the request, her accumulated unease erupted. She stormed into the colony house's kitchen and began chopping up the wooden floor in frustration, shouting that everyone's leaving anyway, so this colony house is useless. Exhausted from chopping, Donna then headed to the town's bar. Kenny had noticed Donna's poor mood and followed her there. He thought she was upset about the person who took his own life the day before, but that wasn't the case. Her worry was that everyone now had their hopes set on going home, but what if the radio tower failed? It would plunge many into despair. Kenny didn't know how to respond to her. However, Donna was sensible. After venting her frustrations, she knew it was impossible to halt the radio tower plan now and would still do her best to help. Jim encountered another problem. He couldn't find the power source needed for the walkie-talkie. He and Jade had removed all the car batteries they could find, but many were already drained. Even when combined, they couldn't power the walkie-talkie for long. Jade was frustrated and kept saying how great it would be if they could find the mysterious man Victor, as he was convinced Victor was the key to leaving the town. Jim couldn't help but feel disdain, thinking this was a clear attempt to avoid the problem at hand. After hearing this, Jade left in anger. Left on his own, Jim couldn't come up with a good solution. Ellis told him that the wires connecting the radio tower were ready. Jade was still preoccupied with finding a power source. He complained to the restaurant owner, who became increasingly annoyed. She fiddled with a few switches, and surprisingly, this action gave Jade a great insight, though he didn't reveal what it was. On Tabitha's side, she was also quite persistent, continuing to dig holes day and night. She wanted to see where the strange wires came from. After finishing her work for the day and preparing to leave the basement, she suddenly heard a strange noise. Thinking it was her son making noise, she called out to him, but there was no response. Tabitha felt something was wrong and hurried upstairs, only to see her husband hanging upside down from the ceiling. It turned out to be just a dream, but it seemed to hint that the hole she was digging wasn't so simple. That afternoon, a disheartened Jim returned home to find his family working hard digging the hole, so he decided to join in the digging effort. As the sky darkened, Tabitha suddenly noticed something unusual. Beneath the sand, there was an incredibly hard object. At the same time, deep in the forest, Boyd was tending to Sarah, who lay unconscious in their makeshift tent. Suddenly, she awoke as if from a nightmare, her eyes drawn to an object in Boyd's hand. He explained that it was the bottle they had found earlier in the day. Upon removing a note from inside, they discovered it bore the year 1864. Similar notes were found in the other bottles as well. Sarah insisted that they should return immediately, explaining that she had heard an ominous voice earlier, warning them that they shouldn't be there and that something more terrifying than a demon lurked outside. As Boyd pondered this, a noise emanated from nearby, followed by the tent beginning to shake. But both he and Sarah were too afraid to venture outside. Fortunately, the shaking ceased after a short while. Boyd hurriedly retrieved a fallen talisman and hung it up. However, a loud explosion followed, and bright lights flashed into the tent, illuminating it like daylight. The pair were terrified and dared not go outside to investigate. They sat there, dumbfounded, until daybreak. As Boyd stepped out of the tent, he was stunned by the sight that the area was covered in dense spiderwebs. Though they couldn't make sense of it, Boyd insisted on heading towards the source of the light from the night before. Sarah tried to persuade him to turn back, reminding him of the warning from the voice. Boyd felt helpless. They didn't know what had dragged them there, or how to return. Besides, the beam of light seemed to come from a searchlight, so they might encounter other people if they reached it. Sarah remained uneasy, wondering if Boyd's wife was trying to send a message to warn him. As soon as she said this, they heard a cry for help in the distance. They rushed to investigate and arrived at a large tree where they found a woman entwined within. Boyd recognized her as his deceased wife. As he started to approach, he disturbed spiders hiding in the ground. Several of them crawled onto him, and Sarah hurried to help remove them. Boyd then realized that what he saw was just an illusion. After they finally escaped the web-infested area, Boyd became increasingly agitated. He hadn't found any clues from the outside world, and his health was deteriorating, probably due to the after-effects of a spider bite. The hallucinations were likely induced by neurotoxins. Boyd grew desperate, feeling the mission was doomed to fail. Sarah encouraged him, asking if he didn't want to reunite with his son. Her words calmed him, and he struggled to his feet, gazing up at the sky. A storm was brewing. In the small town, the residents were working tirelessly to build a signal transmission tower in hopes of escaping their isolated existence. However, they had no power supply. In this eerie town, the electrical wires in everyday appliances weren't real and could operate without being plugged in. But Jade had an idea inspired by a lamp. He ran to Jim's house to share his thoughts. Jade demonstrated that the lamp could light up without being plugged in, which suggested that its base had a power source. He reasoned that this power could also be used for other appliances. To prove his point, he connected a hairdryer he found in an outsider's car to the lamp's base. As the light bulb lit up, the hairdryer also powered on. Jim realized that if they could find more lamps, they could supply enough electricity to the radio tower. Jade called upon the townspeople to search for more lamps and electrical wires. Since the wires within the town were hollow and useless, they had to dismantle wires from outsiders' vehicles. With the hope of returning home within reach, everyone eagerly contributed to the radio tower project. The town's doctor knew of an abandoned camper with electrical wires and quickly went to dismantle them. Kenny was full of energy and began daydreaming about life after leaving the town. He expressed his desire to travel the world with the doctor, which was actually a subtle confession of his feelings. However, when the doctor revealed that she was already engaged before entering the town, the heartbroken Kenny made up an excuse and left in a hurry. Meanwhile, the people in the colony house were busy connecting all the usable lamp bases with electrical wires. Jim was also preparing for the final stages of the project. The wooden radio tower had been constructed, but it needed to be installed on the roof. They had to use the limited resources to create a pulley system that hoisted the tower onto the roof. The walkie-talkie was now fully wired, and Jim explained to his son that each coil on it represented a different frequency for channel switching. Jade was proactive and approached the restaurant owner, wanting to get some food for everyone. He saw her paying tribute to her deceased husband and learned that her greatest sorrow would be leaving her husband behind in the town. Instead of being noisy, Jade comforted her using words but not muscles, saying that her loved one would always be with her no matter where she went. His words moved her, and she invited Jade to join her in the memorial ritual. He then received 2 large baskets of food and distributed them to the hard-working townspeople. Although many had tried to leave before, this time felt different. The doctor sought out Kenny, who was nursing his wounded heart alone. Feeling a bit guilty for her previous rejection, she admitted to being torn between wanting to see her fiancé and traveling the world with Kenny. He was lit up with joy. They joined the others outside the colony house, excitedly watching the roof as the tower was about to be completed. Even Tabitha, who had been digging holes at home, came to witness the momentous event. Under Jade's command, several strong men carefully moved the tower body. It finally stood at the highest point of the town. Jim directed everyone to turn on the power switch. As the countdown reached 0, Jim tested the signal frequency and it was normal. They had succeeded, which meant that the town could contact the outside world. After congratulating her husband, Tabitha returned home and continued her hole-digging project. However, their celebration didn't last long, as a large mass of dark clouds was approaching from afar, signaling a storm. Those under the clouds were even more unfortunate. Boyd had been bitten by a spider and could barely walk. Hearing the booming sound from the night before, they knew they were heading in the right direction. Boyd found the strength to keep going. As torrential rain began to fall, the 2 people pressed on, undeterred. It wasn't raining in the town yet. Jim was adjusting the channels, trying to make contact with the outside world. But despite trying for a long time, no one responded. Seeing the storm approaching, Donna urged everyone to get inside. Jim didn't want to give up, as the tower could be destroyed by the strong winds. This might be their last chance. Donna understood this, and after calling the children back inside, she went to help Jim. The heavy rain soon started to fall. Just as Jim cursed and was about to pack up the equipment, a voice came through the walkie-talkie. To Jim's surprise, the person on the other end knew his name and warned him that his wife shouldn't dig that hole. Afterwards, all the lamp bases burned out. Alarmed, Jim rushed home, fearing that his wife was in danger. As it turned out, Tabitha had been digging in the basement, trying to find the source of the power line. She had made progress yesterday, reaching a depth of over 2 meters, but she couldn't dig any further because there seemed to be a hard object blocking the way down. She went to the town's storeroom and found a pickaxe. But as soon as she made a hole in the basement, the entire bottom of the pit collapsed. Tabitha had nowhere to hide and fell in with it. Fortunately, it wasn't too deep, and Tabitha wasn't seriously injured. She had also solved a mystery. The power line in the wall stopped here. Suddenly, the mysterious man Victor appeared from the depths of the hole. He hadn't been seen since the colony house was attacked by the demons. He said that the boy in white had foreseen Tabitha coming here and arranged for him to meet her. This place was where the demons slept, and it was best to leave as soon as possible. Tabitha looked incredulously at the pattern on the wall. Suddenly, the hole collapsed again. Victor quickly led Tabitha deeper into the hole. When Jim returned home, all he saw was a bottomless pit. At this point, Boyd and Sarah were struggling to move in the pouring rain. He told Sarah to hurry up and not to worry about him. Suddenly, a little boy in white appeared and pointed to a tree hollow. Sarah understood and urgently pulled Boyd to the tree, urging him to crawl inside. However, in the next moment, Boyd found himself in a pit surrounded by walls. The scene shifted, and a radio in the restaurant suddenly began to play a song on its own. Outside the window, a bus slowly came to a stop, possibly indicating that more people were brought to the town. And here ends Season 1 of this drama. This is Daniel.